Hey, welcome on in everyone to ClayShareCon Day 2. And we're going to go right into our last session in the morning before our recorded videos that we'll play for you all during lunch. And we have Sarah from Mayco, and she's going to show us the ritual glazes. Have you seen these yet? They are pretty amazing, and I'm really excited to see all the combos she's going to share with us, and you're going to love these. So we're going to head on out and check in with Sarah and learn more about these ritual glazes. Hey Sarah, how you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
I'm
you and
really,
Nico for being here.
yes, we really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to talk to you guys today about our ritual line of glazes by Mayco. So today I'm going to demo for you guys, just because these glazes are a little bit different than a typical stoneware glaze. So I want to show you guys how to apply and use melt gloop, and also how to apply and use bead. And then I'm going to show you guys some examples and some of the tips and tricks that I've found with working with these glazes. So I'm going to start out with our melt gloop glaze, which you guys can see here. So first thing with this glaze, melt gloop is a very thick glaze. So I always love to show people this. When you first open your jar, the glazes are so thick that you can literally hold them upside down and open. So they're kind of like the consistency almost of like peanut butter. So these glazes can be brushed, which I'll talk a little bit about, but the typical use for these is going to be applying them with either a glaze syringe or an applicator bottle. And it's going to give you these nice like dips or drips and dots. So to show you guys a couple quick examples, let me just show you guys these really quick, just to give you an idea. So this right here in my right hand is going to be our turquoise gloop on top of our flame red underglaze. And you can apply either dots or you can build it up a little bit to get these nice dimensional drips on your piece. This is on an underglaze, so this is going to give you more of that raised texture. If you're firing it in combination with any other stoneware glaze, so this example, the gloop was actually applied first and the glaze was applied over top. This is our matte gray glaze. And you can see here that the gloop flattened out. You don't get as much of the raised texture, but you still get some of that like gloopy goodness going on. So there's a lot of really fun combinations you can do for these. And I'll show you guys a couple more examples at the end here, but I just want to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So, and then to start, I'm going to use this shape. This is our curvy vase shape. So I'm going to get ready to apply gloop to this piece. And when you're applying gloop, it's if you're trying to build it up to create those nice big drips, it's always good to have a piece that has some kind of shoulder to build the gloop up on, which I'm going to show you guys in just a little bit here. But I want to show you how to fill your applicator. So when you are taking your gloop, move this for just a second so you guys can get a better view here. So with the jar here, I have a glaze syringe. And for this guy, when you're filling this, you want to make sure that this has a plunger in here to fill this. So you want to make sure that the plunger is pushed all the way down before you put this in the glaze jar. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to fill as much of your syringe. And these you can get from any like craft supply usually has them, any kind of like craft supply store, or you can find them on like Amazon. But this, to fill it, you want to take the tip of your syringe and you're going to put this in your jar of glaze. And I usually just use this to kind of mix up the glaze. And again, this is thick, so it's going to take a second to kind of like wake it up almost. Sometimes they have like I almost want to say they're thixotropic, almost like a slip. So you kind of have to like wake up the glaze a little bit. And then after I've stirred that, when I pull this plunger up, I want to make sure that I'm not keeping the syringe in the same spot in the jar as I do this, because you can create air pockets in your syringe. So what I'll do, and I don't want it to burp on me later, so I'm going to pull this plunger up and I'm just going to kind of move the syringe back and forth slowly. And then you can see this is now full. And I just scrape away the excess glaze. And then I'll take a sponge and just clean off the tip of my syringe so that it's not as messy. And so this is filled and ready to be used, but I'm gonna also show you guys, in case you are not a fan of the glaze syringe, or if you don't have access to one of those, you can also use a trailing bottle. So this right here is just one of our applicator bottles, and ours come fully sealed at the tip here. So when you first get these, if you're getting them from us, you want to make sure that you're cutting this tip, otherwise your product's never going to come out. And I would recommend, if you're using a bottle style like this, always cut closer to the tip to start. Once you cut it away, you can't put it back. So you always want to start with a smaller opening. And then if you need to make it larger, then you can just cut more away. So this one I've already cut, and it's still a pretty small opening. That way I can get some smaller dots. So I'm going to open this guy up and take the cap off so that I can get this filled. And with these, when you fill them, it's similar idea of the glaze syringe, but to get product to go inside of here, you want to squeeze this applicator. And so I'm squeezing the applicator bottle, and I'm going to submerge the opening of the applicator bottle in the glaze, and I'm going to move this around, and then I'm going to release the pressure from my fingers and gently squeeze this bottle in the opposite direction, and it's going to pick up that glaze. And again, I'm going to clean off the tip here, and you can see this is only full at the very tip of the bottle. So what I have to do now in order to fill this fully is I'm going to clean the top of this applicator bottle because I don't want it to go everywhere. So I'm going to clean this off, and then I'm just going to tap this on the table gently so I can move that product from the top down here. So and then you can see that product has now moved to the bottom. So this is going to take a few times of squeezing it and filling the jar to get this full. So I'm going to do this just one more time so I can get a little bit more product in here. If I don't fill this at least, I would say 3/4 of the way full, what'll happen is when you go to use this later to apply it, you're going to have to use a lot of pressure to get this product out of the jar because you're going to have a lot of air in here. So you want as little air as possible. So I'm going to squeeze this guy again. So it's squeezed. I'm going to put this tip back down in the jar. And then I'm going to gently squeeze it in the opposite direction. Scrape away the excess glaze. And then clean off that tip. With my sponge. Okay, and I think I have this pretty full now, so I'm going to tap this down just because I want to see roughly how much glaze I have in here, but I think this should be good. It feels pretty full. So yeah, there we go. And you can kind of tell when you're tapping this, if you see any air bubbles start to come out of the top, if this starts to kind of splatter, then you know there's air trapped in here, and you just want to keep tapping this until you don't see that happening. Then you have a pretty good idea that there's minimal air in this applicator. So I'm going to put this cap back on, and now, but because I've been tapping it upright, I want to make sure that the product is down near the tip of the nozzle here. So I'm just going to shake this a little bit, and sometimes I'll just hit it on the back of my hand. So now I want the product to move down to the applicator tip. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just test this on the table, but I can already see that the product is coming through this applicator tip, but I'll just squeeze this out onto the table and we're good to go with this now. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do, now that I have my applicators full, is I'm going to move over to my piece here. So I'm going to move this over for you guys. Okay. And then, as I was saying before, for Melt Gloop, you can create either dots or drips with Melt Gloop. So it really just depends on your preference of applicator. For me personally, if I'm trying to get drips and I need to build up a lot of product, I prefer to use the syringe because it's less strain on your wrist if I'm squeezing this constantly. For this, I can just push this plunger down and build up the product a little bit easier. So what I'm gonna do to build up drips is, again, I look for areas where there's more surface area for the glaze to hold on to. So I'm gonna take this and this shoulder of the vase here, I'm just gonna start to push down on the plunger of the syringe, and I can start to really build up this glaze. And so I'll go around a couple times and just build this up on the shoulder. And you'd be surprised at how much you can build this up. So I'm gonna, and again, see, I already went through a lot of product in this syringe. So if I need to, I can just go back in and refill this really easy. So if you're doing drips, I would say the syringe is usually a little bit more friendly for this. And also, you can build up on the rim of a piece here. If you're trying to build a drip off of like the lip or a rim of a piece, what I would recommend is if you build this product out too far horizontally, as it dries, it's going to shrink and it may fall off your piece. So it's best to build it more vertically. That way you have less issues with it falling off as it dries and when it's firing. So I would say if you're trying to build something on the very edge, top edge of your piece, I like to start and build the glaze up, but I'll kind of counterbalance it. That way there's product on both sides and it's easier to build that up and it won't have as much of an issue with falling off, because if you were just building it out horizontally, I'll show you guys here. I'll just put a drip. So I'll build one up horizontally and I'll let this dry. And that one may have a harder time holding on. The larger you make them, the more gravity just wants to take over if you're building this way. But eventually in the firing, this piece is, everything's going to move vertically. So if you build it vertically, you'll just eventually get those vertical drips. So I'm going to go through, build up a little more here. But then I also want to show you guys, on top of just making drips, you can also create dots with Milk Gloop. And you also want to think about, when you're using Milk Gloop, this is just on raw bisque right now. So this is going to stay pretty dimensional, just how that example I showed you on the underglaze is. If you're firing Milk Gloop on raw bisque or on underglaze or an engobe, you're going to have more of that textural look to your glaze. If you're firing in combination with any other stoneware glaze, you'll still get the gloop effect, but it's going to be a little more subtle. You're not going to have as much of the raised texture. So you'll still have dots and drips, but they will kind of flare out into whatever base glaze you're using. So it just depends on what kind of look you're going for. But if I wanted to make dots on this piece, let me move over actually to my applicator bottle for this. I prefer this applicator if I'm trying to do individual dots. Sometimes when you're trying to control the syringe for dots, it's a little difficult to control exactly how much pressure you're putting on this plunger. So if you're trying for more exact dots, I would say this is the way to go, but you do whatever works better for you. So for this, if I'm doing dots, I'm going to actually rotate this piece so you guys can see a little better here. So some of this gloop may slide a little bit on me, but I think it's pretty dry already. So you can see you can build this up pretty thickly. And so when I'm doing dots, however, I can take this applicator bottle, and again, I'm just going to test it, make sure the product's coming out. So I'm just going to place dots onto my piece here. And as long as your dots are staying rough, I like to say roughly like pea-sized or smaller, they're not going to be very fluid and you're not going to have that vertical drag on the glaze as it fires. So these are going to stay pretty much where I place them. Once they start to get a little bit bigger than pea size, then they become more fluid and you'll see some movement in them after the firing. But if you wanted to do a specific dot design, this is a really great way to get that raised texture. and keep it where you've placed it. But you also want to keep in mind this glaze, as it dries, it becomes pretty fragile. So you want to be really careful when you're transporting this to the kiln that you're being mindful of how you're moving this piece. Because if I were to, as these dry, I'll show you a little bit later. So it's kind of great because if you make a mistake like this one right here, I kind of had a drip that I didn't want. I can just pop that off later and then reapply that. And it shouldn't have any issues. So, but if you don't want your little dots to fall off, you just want to be really cautious with how you're touching your piece as you're transporting it from one place to another, because this glaze can be a little delicate. But you can see I'm holding this pretty much sideways right now, and those globs are still holding on, but they're still semi-wet. So as this gets more dry, those globs are going to become a lot more fragile. So you do have some working time with this, but it's just something to keep in mind. And so I'm going to keep this guy here, and I'm going to now fill another syringe with a different color, because I also want to talk about how you can layer the different colors of Melt Gloop. So you can layer these in combination with other stoneware glazes, and you can layer them with each other. So I'm just going to fill a second syringe here with our slime green Melt Gloop. So same thing as what I did with the blue. Clean off this applicator. And we have multiple colors for Melt Gloop, so you can intermix them, you can build them on top of each other. I feel like the combinations you could do with this are kind of endless. So if you're going to be building these up and having them drip together, so what I would say for these larger drops, I'm just going to build up some green on top of the blue here. And I would say it's really difficult to gauge until you work with the product how long of a drip you're going to get from how much you build this up. So I would say I would recommend, if this is something you're interested in using in your work, I would recommend everyone's hand is a little different when applying this. So I would say have test tiles, fire your pieces on a slab of clay that's been pre-bisqued, just to protect your kiln shelves. You can also fire on a bed of like fine mesh silica sand or play sand, just to keep your shelves from getting destroyed. However works best for you, but I would say just a basic slab that your piece is on should save your kiln shelves a lot of the time. But these are pretty mobile glazes, so the more you build them up, the more you're going to have running and dripping. But until you get a feel for how much you can get away with, I would say testing is going to be your friend.
Yeah, folks are really interested to know how far down those big giant drops or those gloopies are going to go.
Yeah, and it's so, it depends on how, because even how wide you build the drip, because all the product you put on here is going to be mobile. So it's hard to say until you apply it with your own hand and see your results. I would recommend too that I when I've been testing and working with these glazes, I take pictures before and after. So that way you have an idea of, okay, I built it up roughly this much and this is the result I got. So then the next time you go to use it, you can tell roughly, okay, if I use this amount, I'm going to get roughly this large of a drip. And then hopefully I think that would be a good way to navigate that. Just do a couple tests, and that way you can kind of get a better feel for how the product works. But yeah, but it's a lot of fun, and I know it looks crazy. It kind of looks like ice cream up top right now, but and you can do several different designs. I actually have some examples that I'll show you guys here of Melt Gloop. So I have, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so how long after you glaze it, do you wait to put it in the kiln? Do you wait till it's dry all the way?
So you can, but I would recommend, so as this dries, it's going to become more and more fragile. So I would recommend the sooner you can get it to where it will be fired, the better. I typically will glaze with milk loop and then fire it the same day, just so that I have less risk of pieces of glaze falling off as it's drying. And as it becomes dry, these little bits become more fragile. So just picking it up and moving it, you're just kind of inviting possibility for pieces to fall off. So the more you can mitigate that, I say the better. But if you have to store it on a shelf for a couple days until you fire it, you just want to be, again, really cautious with how rough you're being with your piece. So I would just say move slowly, be cautious, because they do become pretty fragile. And I think actually these now are dry enough that I can show you guys. So these little dots that I applied, they're pretty dry already. So if I take my thumb, I can just pop this off. And you can see there's a little bit of staining there, but I can reapply that dot. So as these get even more dry, they're way easier to pop off. So, but that's kind of what would happen here. So if you make a mistake, you can just pop off your dot and reapply. And I want to show you guys, so for milk loop, like I said, you can apply those dots in specific areas. So depending on what kind of design work you're doing, if you want to do more design work, here is an example. So this is like a Starry Night inspired piece that was done with milk loop. But these dots were all applied with an applicator bottle in various colors. And some of these dots here, you can see as they get larger, they become more mobile. So you just want to keep that in mind. And then these are also some milk loop pieces that I showed you guys. So this might be a little difficult to pick up on camera, but these two, I've applied milk loop over and under the same glaze. So it gets a pretty similar result. The only main difference is you get more on this one here, the glaze was applied over top, and it's hard to see in this lighting, sorry guys, but you'll get more like pulling and breaking of the glaze when it's applied over top of Gloop. And then this one, you'll see more of the color of the Gloop on top of the glaze. But they are very fluid. So you can see here that there was some pulling that happened. There's little spots where the glaze kind of shifted and moved. So I wanted to talk about in regards to dinnerware with these glazes. I would just keep in mind to be mindful that these are very fluid, mobile glazes, and just use your discretion for dinnerware safety. Anything like this, if your clay is not fully vitrified, any kind of textured glaze, you just want to think about that you're inviting potential for things to not get fully cleaned, and we just want to be mindful of that. So it really just depends on the outcome of your glazes here. But I would say these are more so designed for sculptural. Yeah.
So do you have do you have one that shows a really drippy, like replicates the one you just showed?
Ooh, really drippy. I would say
really I think where they're taking bets how far down that the one you just demonstrated will drip.
So this one here is a very similar piece to what I'm doing here. So these drips are probably a little larger than what I did to create these really long drips. And the more you build it up, the more mobile you're going to get. So you just want to keep that in mind. Again, these ones, I was able to stop them before they hit the kiln shelf. But if you're new to the product, again, you just want to think about, if you're trying to protect your kiln shelves, just have some kind of barrier for yourself so that you don't have those issues. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And if you're firing in a community kiln, make sure that whoever's loading the kiln knows about these glazes, and just like anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're really cool, and they could run. So you definitely make sure they use, if you don't fire your own pieces, they use something under it so it doesn't run onto their shelves. Questions about, if you put a clear on top of the gloop, will it flatten them out?
Yes. So any combination of any other stoneware glaze with milk loop, they're gonna become flat, and you'll still have some of that raised texture, So this one right here was in combination with another stoneware glaze. This is a matte glaze. And I've noticed, I've had questions from people before if matte glazes would work the same way as a clear. And so yes, even though this is a matte glaze, it still caused the gloop to kind of flatten out and kind of run into the glaze instead of stay more dimensional. So it just depends on what kind of look you're going for overall. But it's just something to keep in mind. So a clear glaze would behave very similarly to this. You're going to get this kind of like flattened gloop look, but you can still get these drips and dots. They're just going to read a little bit differently than if you were to fire on an underglaze or an engobe. And then I also wanted to talk about if you are firing on an underglaze or an engobe for both Melt Gloop and Bead, which I'll get to in a minute, we have found through testing that it is best to do 2 separate firings. The underglaze and engobes, if you co-fire them, so if you're applying your underglaze at the same time as you're applying Melt Gloop or Bead, these glazes specifically are so powerful and so fluid that they can move your underglaze or engobe slightly and kind of pull it into the glaze. So in order to prevent that, I would recommend doing 2 firings. So you could bisque on your underglaze or engobe first. You could fire it to 04, 06, whatever your bisque temperature is, and then fire your piece again with the glaze to cone 6. And that is how you're going to get that dimensional texture to your piece. So this piece here, this was our flame red underglaze, and that was pre-fired, bisque fired to cone 04, just the underglaze. And then the turquoise bead was applied in like dollops to get these drips, and then in dots. But this stayed dimensional, as you can see. So if you want the dimension and you want a solid background color, that's a way I would recommend going about that. And I'm sorry, Jessica, did you have another question that I missed? I'm trying to remember.
Answered.
Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. So I think, the last thing I wanted to talk about briefly for Melt Gloop, like I said, the typical ways to apply this glaze and how it was designed was for dots and drips that are applied with the glaze syringe or the applicator bottle. However, we have found through testing that you can apply it with a brush in different combinations with different glazes. So this piece here was our Melt Gloop glaze, half Melt Gloop, the white Melt Gloop, and then half of our Maroon Lagoon Jungle Gem, which is actually one of our low fire glazes, but you can combine this with other glazes and brush this on to get this kind of like drippy, goopy effect, which I think is really interesting and really cool. So it's another great way to use Gloop if you don't want to use the applicator bottles. But again, I would recommend doing testing for this and just see how much you need to build it up in order to get this type of effect. But so far, we've found that a 50-50 split between the two gives you these nice, juicy drips.
I love those. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I feel like we're just going to keep finding more ways to use it. They're so fun, and I think they're really versatile. So I really hope you guys enjoy playing with these glazes, because I have. And so I am going to get set up here to show you guys bead, and then show some examples of bead as well. So I'm just going to move this to the side.
So what cone do you fire these to? What glaze?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So for Melt Gloop and Bead, they are cone 6 glazes. You can fire them to cone 5. I would say, I like to say that they're happiest at cone 6. They tend to have their most vibrancy, and they tend to have the most vivid effects at cone 6, but you can absolutely do cone 5. We've also done cone 10 testing. Some of the colors shift, and you get some textural differences when you go to cone 10. So it just depends on the look you're going for, but our website will show you those results. So I would say if you're interested in that, take a look at our website. Also a good time to bring up that on all of our jars for these glazes, we do have QR codes. So if you scan this with your cell phone, this will take you to the webpage for either Gloop or Bead, and you can see all that information directly on the website. So we have a lot more information for you guys there if you're interested. All right, I'm going to move this. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about Bead, which is another line of glazes in our Ritual by Mayco glaze. But these ones apply differently than Gloop, and they're a brushing glaze. So if you're wanting a brushing glaze, that's going to be this guy. So these are going to be, this is one of our glazes here, and this is our blue bead. But just to show you guys, bead is going to be dimensional dots. So unlike with Milk Gloop, this glaze is going to give you this nice dimensional beaded texture, which you can make beads with Milk Gloop, but this is a randomized pattern. You cannot specifically place where these beads will end up. This happens in the firing with beads, so that's something to keep in mind. If you want specific intentionally placed dots, then you'd want to go with Milk Gloop, but bead is going to give you more of like a random pattern. And I'll show you guys an example before I show you the demo, just so we know what we're looking at. So these are a couple examples here. So this is going to be a vase that has bead on it. This is an ombre between our pink and red bead on top of our blush and flame red underglaze. So this is another example where the underglaze was pre-fired to cone 04, and then the glaze was applied after and then fired to cone 6. The inside of this is our red gloss glaze. So just something to keep in mind. Again, if you don't want the underglaze to roll up into the glaze, then do 2 separate firings. And I think we can put an image up real quick on the screen that I can show you guys. Tell me if you can see that. Okay, perfect. So this is just to show you guys the difference between co-firing the glaze with an underglaze and then doing 2 separate firings. So you can see where it says 1 firing, these are the same products. So it's the same underglaze, same orange bead glaze, but the 1 firing, there's different numbers of coats there. So you'll see the 2 coat of bead, and then you'll see 4 coats of bead. The more bead that you build up, the more that this glaze wants to roll into itself, and it tends to pull whatever is underneath it. So that piece that has 4 coats, the underglaze can actually become kind of sharp. So it's just something to keep in mind. The more that you build up this product, if you don't do 2 separate firings, it depends on what you're going for, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you don't want that texture, then you would want to do 2 separate firings. And so you can see that where it says 2 firings, we have the same combination of underglaze and glaze, 2 coats and 4 coats, but there you're still getting that rounded, smooth texture of the beads in various sizes. The more you build it up, the bigger the beads are going to be. But you just want to keep in mind, if you don't want that underglaze to pull with the glaze, to do 2 separate firings. Okay. And so, and I'll show you guys a couple more examples here, but I want to show a demo of how to apply the glaze. So for this, I'm going to pull out another bisque shape here. And like I said, this glaze, the bead glaze, is going to be a brushing glaze. So these, the bead glazes are a little thicker than a typical stoneware glaze, but they're nowhere near as thick as Gloop. So you can still brush these pretty easily. So for these glazes, you just want to shake your jar a little bit to mix the glaze. And when you apply these, they do apply very differently than a traditional stoneware glaze in a lot of ways. So I'm going to rotate this so you guys can see here, but I'm still using a fan brush to apply this glaze. So when I go to apply this though, bead tends to, it's best when you apply this in alternate directions. So I'll have to apply it kind of quickly because this glaze dries rather fast, but you want to do 1 coat, I would say horizontally, and your 2nd coat vertically, if you want a more randomized pattern with your beading. So if you apply all your coats in the same direction, this glaze tends to show the evidence of how you applied it. And I'll show you guys an example of that here in a little bit. But I'm gonna go ahead, and you can already see, so this glaze will lose its shine after I've applied it pretty quickly. And the way that this glaze works is it works off of the glaze breaking apart and creating almost like these little fault lines. So you have to catch this glaze at the right time to apply your next coat. It's not something you can just sit down, walk away from, and add another coat later. It's very time sensitive. So here you can see that first coat has already lost its sheen. It's looking more matte. So after I've applied my first coat horizontally, I'm gonna go ahead and apply my second coat vertically. Because if I wait too long, those cracks that are starting to form in the glaze are gonna become so intense that when I go to add more product, it's just gonna have it rehydrate and then flake off of the piece. So you wanna catch it before it gets too dry. So here you can see that shine on the piece. I'm just waiting for that to dissipate a little bit. And I'm gonna go in for my third coat. And again, I'm gonna alternate. So now I'm gonna go back to horizontal. So now that shine is gone. And I kind of like to work in sections when I'm using this glaze just because it dries so quickly. So I'll do one section of a piece and then move on if it's a larger area. But that right here was 3 coats. And you can see it's drying really quickly, even still. But the more you build this up, the larger your beads will be in the final fired result. I'm going to do one more coat here. So this is my 4th coat. And again, I'm alternating that. So now I'm applying this vertically. And then I'm going to wait for this to dry. And as this side's drying, I want to talk about on the other side here, I'm going to alternate between 2 colors of bead. So just how I was talking about with Milk Gloop, how you can layer Milk Gloop on other stoneware glazes. You can also layer Milk Gloop with other colors of Milk Gloop. You can do the same thing with bead. So I'm just going to, on this next side of the vase, I'm going to alternate between blue and orange and layer those 2. And something you want to keep in mind when you're layering colors of bead, what I have found is, again, the beading force of this glaze is so strong. I think about it like when it's laying flat, whatever glaze is on the bottom is going to roll up and you're going to see that glaze more. So when you're thinking about layering colors, if there's a particular color that you want to see more of in your fired result, you want to have that be your base color. Because that's what's going to be what folds up and rounds along those edges. So for this side, let's say I wanted the orange to be a little more prominent. I'm going to do my base coat in orange here. So I'm going to start and apply my first coat of orange horizontally. And then I'm going to do my second coat in blue. And I'm going to wait for that sheen to be gone. Already pretty quickly that's gone. Now I'm going to go through, do my second coat. And I think for this side, I'll just do those 2 coats, leave that pretty thick. But I want to show you guys, as this starts to dry, you're going to see more of that flaking and breaking in the glaze. So I'm going to give this a second to dry a little bit more, but I want to show you guys some examples. And I also want to talk about, before I show you the examples, sorry about that, I want to show you guys for bead, you can actually get 2 different looks with bead. So through testing, we found this glaze, the bead glaze, works on the principle of how a crawl glaze works. So if you think about crawling in a glaze, it's the glaze separating, moving apart, kind of rolling onto itself. And the more you build this up, the more glaze you have to create those beads. But if you do less coats, you get more of a crawl look in your glaze. So if I apply just one coat of a glaze, 1 to 2 coats, you're still going to see the glaze breaking and pulling apart, but you're not going to see as much of the beading. So up here, I'll just do one quick coat along the top of the vase.
Now, can you mix these colors with each other, the beads? So
Oh, absolutely.
Oops.
Yeah, so you could intermix them. You can layer them on top of each other. They could certainly be intermixed. Mm-hmm.
And if you want to put a glaze on, would you glaze? Would you do a glaze first and then put the bead, or would you put the bead on then the glaze?
I would say you could do either way. So while this is drying, I'll actually show you some more examples. So I have here 2 ramekins that I glazed with the same combination of glazes, and one is bead over and one is bead under. So again, the beading force of this glaze is so powerful that if anything is put with it, it's going to react a little bit differently. But this one here, this was bead put down first, and then we have our peacock glaze over top. So you can see the bead rolled and moved the glaze into it. So it gives you this really cool effect. But if you're looking for something a little bit different and you don't want the glaze to roll up like this with the bead, then you want to put bead over top of the glaze. So when bead is placed over top of another stoneware glaze, you get this kind of broken up crawl-like look on your surface. And depending on the base glaze you're using, you may see more fluidity in your beads. So you can see here on the outside, I did, I think 5, yeah, this was 5 coats of bead on the outside here. So these were pretty heavy. And that base glaze is, I would say, it's pretty stable, but it's also kind of semi-fluid if you build up enough coats. So the weight of the beads kind of made these move down the piece a little bit. But it just depends on what kind of look you're going for. And again, I know people may be thinking about dinnerware for things like this. So again, same thing as milk gloop. These glazes are designed to be textural, more sculptural. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for dinnerware, but if you are going to use them for something dinnerware related, just keep in mind anytime, you have a textured glaze that's separating, you're inviting opportunity for that to be a little bit more difficult to clean. So just want to keep that in mind. But just an example of showing you guys layering over and under. So you can absolutely do these in hundreds of combinations. And, oh, and I also wanted to show you guys also again while this is drying, because this is starting to crack. I want to show you guys what that looks like. But this here is an example of bead layered one on top of the other. So this was white bead applied first, and you can tell because the edges of the beads, you can see the white is wrapping around the edges, and then the blue bead was applied on top of that. And this also has our blue underglaze that was pre-fired on, so that way the underglaze stays nice and solid underneath of the bead. So that way you have a nice solid background.
So I had a question. When you're using underglaze, you do the underglaze and then you fire it, and then you do the bead and fire it. But if you're using a glaze, do you just do glaze and then bead on top of glaze and fire? You don't do glaze, fire, then bead and fire.
So I've done a lot of crazy firings with these. You can apply bead at the same time. So if I was applying a stoneware glaze to this piece, I would apply the stoneware glaze, apply bead, put it in the kiln. You can absolutely
We lost connection?
glaze on top of the fired beads and then fired it again. So I really feel like the combinations of this are just endless of how you can just keep layering and keep refiring. So if you're not happy with a piece, I've definitely refired pieces before and added more and then had a great result after a refire.
So either way, either or.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Question, are they food safe?
So food safety, ooh, sorry, I lost my microphone. Food safety, they are food safe. Food safe is a regulated term from the FDA. So they are all tested for food safety. They are food safe. But if you're referring to texture in the glaze for dinnerware, that's where the conversation is a little bit more nuanced. So they are technically food safe, but you just want to use your discretion for dinnerware safety. Again, you want to think about, is your clay body fully vitrified, things of that nature. So the glaze standalone is a food safe product, but there's other factors that come into play when we're talking about dinnerware safety. So I would say you have to use your discretion, make sure you're using the right clay body with these glazes, but they could be used for dinnerware. They are just more so recommended as a sculptural textural glaze.
Right, we have about 30 seconds. I don't know if you'd like to leave us with anything before we go.
I just want to show you guys if this will pick up on camera. This is starting to crack a little bit here. So it's so hard to pick up. But again, as this dries, it's going to become really fragile. So just make sure you're being gentle with your pieces. But I really hope you guys try out these products and show us what you're making, because I think they're a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Mayco will be at NCECA, and they're going to have examples of all these. So if folks go there, and if they have any questions, they can go to maycocolors.com and reach out and follow Mayco across all the social media, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. And there's a great group too. There's a Mayco group.
Yes,
on
our
Facebook.
mudroom.
Yes. So, all right, Sarah, thank you so much. These are wonderful. I can't wait to try them out. It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks. Thank you. So
very exciting. Lots of possibilities with these glazes. I know we're all excited to try them, and I can't wait to, put them on glaze, put them on, under glaze, play with everything. You got to get to know these and try them out. I know we had so many questions coming in the chat that we couldn't get to everyone. I tried to answer as many as I could, and if you have questions, again, reach out, maycocolors.com, and they will gladly answer it and help you. So we're going to have a couple recorded sessions for you now. We have a video from Nikolai from Bushcraft Tools. He's going to be doing a little demo, and then we have a video from the ceramic shop. Those are going to play. That allows me to eat lunch, because if I don't do that, then I don't eat lunch. So we have the recorded videos. So thank you, everybody. My tummy will thank you, because I won't be hungry, which makes for a happy Jessie. So, and then after that, we're going to be coming back live at 12:45 with Maria Sampson, and she's going to be showing Georgie's glazes. So we're going to have, it's a glaze day here on ClayShareCon. So we will see you back live then, but don't miss the recorded videos that are coming up next. Thank you, Mayco, and a huge thank you to Sarah for this great demo. Thanks, everyone.